Now it's time to think about the way we think. Do you trust your brain? Do you believe in it? Well, according to our guest today, a clinical psychologist and neuroscientist, we actually need to doubt ourselves more. Our brains often described as the computers of our bodies, the impressive control centre through which our every thought and action passes. Well, like computers, they can have bugs and get a lot wrong. In fact, they're apparently full of biases and constantly make predictions about our surroundings and what we should do. Mr. Albert Moukheiber, thanks for coming in to give us your time. Now, you have a new book out that basically says your brain plays tricks on you. Ultimately, you say we need to doubt our own thoughts. Explain a bit more.
Yeah, we tend to think that we are like these precise beings. We have certainty in our opinions and our likes and dislikes, but most of the time our brain is just doing the best it can in a very complex world with extremely limited attentional resources and perceptual resources to guess and make predictions about how the world works. And most of the time it works really well, but sometimes it goes really, really wrong. And when it does, the consequences can have real impacts on society or on myself. So we should be a bit wary of trusting ourselves.
Give me an example of where it goes wrong. Is it on the bigger decisions? Because we're constantly, thinking and acting on almost an unconscious level.
It can go wrong on very basic levels. For example, a misunderstanding. Something very banal that can happen every day. I see you do something and then my brain interprets this as a certain intention, which is completely different than your own. And then I might feel like be offended, and then we can get, it's an everyday story that happens every day. Every time you hear someone saying, but that's not what I said.
Yeah, jumping to conclusions. We skip steps.
Because we don't have the resources. It's not like we do it out of fun. We live in a world where we have to treat so many information, like you're a journalist, and then we don't have the time, nor the resources, nor the energy to do this, so we have to take shortcuts.
Or I believe your theory is that we should slow things down, because you explained that the brain thinks on two speeds. Explain that to me, and how can we consciously catch ourselves doing it and slow things down?
So we have like a dual processes function. A part of our brain needs to go fast because we have to remember that we've lived in a natural habitat for a long time where there are predators and we can't have time to think, oh, this is a lion, what am I going to do? We just run. And then another part of our brain is more analytical, takes the time to think things through. And we need to slow down to activate this because, for example, stress, when we're stressed, we become more irritable, we're more like angry, etc. It's because we don't have time to slow down. When we're stressed, we feel like we need to go fast. But just like when driving, if you go fast, there are higher risks of making mistakes. And these mistakes, again, can have consequences on yourself or on society or on your environment.
Yeah, you mentioned there the environment. So to slow down and think about the way we're thinking. But, in fact, that information overload, it can actually make the brain, you were saying, bad for the environment.
Yeah, of course. For example, we can see literally the environment, like the planet, how not taking into account all the signals that we have been receiving from the 70s and the 80s, and we still haven't done anything. And even today, every day we say we have to save the planet, and yet we don't really act because of all these complexities.
Well, we do see some people, though, breaking the trend.
Of course, and this is what's interesting, is that with the same brain, with the same shared world, each one of us can react extremely differently. Some people would dedicate their time to go cleaning up beaches, while others take a plane just for a 1-hour meeting 1,000 kilometers away. And this is what fascinates me, is the diversity of the human species, whereas we're supposed to share the same world. Like, why do we have so many?
Is that something innate in the way our brains are made up, or is that something, because we can retrain our brains as well?
Yeah, but the innate part is our limited attentional resources. Like, we can't always be aware of everything that is happening. Another example that illustrates my point is smoking. Like, when you smoke, you know that it's not good, but your brain will do these operations of rationalizing and telling yourself it's fine, everybody does it, everyone's going to die eventually. But like, let's have a thought experiment where if you smoke, the next day you have a 10% chance of getting cancer. No one would smoke because it's an immediate punishment. The fact that it's delayed in time, our brain doesn't have the resources to project the concept of projecting something that is so far off, and we just banalize it. And the same thing happened with ecology, probably.
But when we bring it into our conscious more, we can change the way our brain functions. You say you were a stressed and timid person, which clearly isn't the case anymore. So how do you go about doing that?
So there are many ways. We are still investigating how it works. As a psychologist, as a clinical psychologist, this is what I try to do with my patients. If we couldn't change, then I'd be out of a job. obviously, but it takes time, it takes effort. It's not something easy because habits are hard to break. We are creatures of habits. Often the environment doesn't help. For example, let's say I live in a country where they don't recycle, and I decide that I want to recycle. I'm facing an extremely uphill battle. So there are many factors that need to come in play. Often it has a social dimension, a contextual dimension, and an individual dimension. So we can learn how these mechanisms work, what are metacognition, so thinking about my thinking, and then try to be more wary about my intuitions, my emotions, my automatic thoughts.
So wary about the information inside as well as the information outside. Tell us briefly, the rise of fake news and why so many of us are fake news appeals.
Because fake news are engineered in a way to appeal to us. So fake news are often either things that have threats, explanations for very obscure information, and this is something that is quite important to us because for evolutionary reasons, we need to attend to these dangerous stimuli. So fake news, for example, spreads 6 times faster than normal news because of these. And now there's a whole business out of fake news. So there are websites that are created only to post anxiogenic fake news, especially around health. Don't vaccinate your kids. We have found the solution for cancer. It's always around these health or danger things. And again,
that simple message and our constant search maybe to understand. And very, very briefly, I did hear you say before, and it's something that quite shocked me, this myth, the left, we all believe that there's a left part of our brain and a right. You believe it's all the same?
It's not all the same. It would be a total nonsense to put all your eggs in one basket. Imagine that you put all the eggs of creativity in one half and all the eggs of rationality in the other half. Our brain is much more complex than that. Most of our functions are bilateral, so that if we lose one, another can take its place. Yeah, for example, people that lose a limb have something we call phantom limbs pain. They feel pain in their hand that is not there anymore because it's all mapped in the brain, and then it will be used for something else. Some functions in our brain are lateralized, but most of them are bilateral, and it's a total nonsense to say that we have like a left brain that's creative and the right brain that's
things we were taught at school.
Yeah.
Mr. Albert Moukheiber, thanks for coming in and clarifying it all for us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that brings us to the end of Perspective.